Hello folks, for the World of Warcraft development team, this was, thanks to Thanksgiving, a shorter week than usual, with the usually weekly midnight beta build being deferred until next week. But that did not mean that it was a quiet week, with a series of important announcements from the developers as they responded to player feedback across a variety of hot topics. And it may be that this will turn out to be somewhat of a pivotal week for the Midnight expansion. But before I dive into all of that, as I'm sure all of you already know, the Midnight expansion will be launching worldwide on March the 3rd at 3 PM Pacific time or midnight. That's on the 3rd for Europe. But before we arrive at midnight proper, we do still have the release of patch 12.27 next week on the 2nd of December. Now, I have seen a little bit of a misunderstanding in the community that this is the midnight pre-patch, but that's not the case. Despite that though, it will still have housing early access for people who pre-purchased the Midnight expansion, along with a new campaign storyline that does act as a bit of a prologue for Midnight, so I can totally see why some people might feel like it is the pre-patch. Along with that, we're also getting a new lore working campaign, Pandaren Heritage Armor, Shadowlands Time Walking, and updates to Skyriding, the portal rooms in the faction capitals, and player leveling. The following week of the 9th, and we get the return of the Brawlers Guild, along with the launch of Phase 5 of Legion Remix, which will most likely see the addition of housing related rewards and some kind of catch-up system to help us to snap up all of those remaining rewards that we've missed out on so far. Next up after that will be the Midnight pre-patch 12.0 proper, which I'm predicting will launch the week of January the 20th, which is basically the day following the end of Legion Remix. This will be when the add-on Disarmament will kick in, alongside updated nameplates, the new damage meter, and boss timelines. We'll also be getting the class and spec reworks, an item level and stats squish, and the launch of the new transmogrification system. That week will also most likely be when the Mythic Plus and PvP seasons end, albeit that content will continue to be available throughout the pre-patch, as will the ahead of the curve in Mythic Raid mounts, with the former being removed when Midnight launches proper and the latter going to a 1% drop rate. According to a data mine splash screen for the pre-patch, the pre-patches event, which will be set in the Twilight Highlands, will launch the following week, that of the 27th of January. According to the Battle.net store listing for the Midnight Epic Edition, early access will last a minimum of 3 days, which would imply a release date for early access of Friday the 27th of February, again at 3 PM Pacific and midnight for the EU. But the War Within's early access was extended to 4 days, and I suspect that was to avoid releasing an expansion on a Friday afternoon, and I would not be very surprised if we see a repeat of that this time around. So I'm personally predicting that early access will launch on Thursday the 26th of February. Now, if you're planning on booking time off work for early access or changing any other IRL plans, I'd personally advise waiting until those dates are officially confirmed, or at least thinking very carefully about the timing before you lock your plans in. The launch of early access will open up the 80 to 90 leveling experience, along with the new zones, including a spectacular revamp of Silvermoon and Eversong Woods, and also very likely normal dungeons, level 1 and 2 delves, and professions. And the delayed access general release, of course, will follow on the 2nd of March. The weekly reset of that week, which will be the 3rd for the US and the 4th for the EU, will also very likely be when we'll see the launch of Heroic Dungeons, and I suspect also Mythic Zero, as the developers have hinted in a couple of interviews that they are planning on bringing the Mythic Zero World Tour weeks back. At the start of a brand new expansion, we usually see a 2-week gap before the main season starts, and so I expect that Mythic Plus and the new Voidspire raid will open 2 weeks later on March the 17th in normal and heroic, with Mythic, LFR and Story Mode opening up the following week of the 24th. The release timelines for the other 2 raids, the Dream Rift and the March of Quell Danath, do remain to be seen. The developers have said in interviews that March of Quell Danath will be a few weeks later after the main raid, but I'm also pretty doubtful that the mid-1 boss raid will be opening up before the race to World First for the first raid is concluded. But pulling us back into the present, and the last week or so has seen seen us finally get a first view of how raiding in Mythic Plus is going to be changing in response to the new add-on restrictions. For the raid itself, tuning as always has been a bit all over the place, which has made it a bit difficult to get a good handle on how the fights will ultimately land. But my first impressions are that the fight mechanics have been toned down a lot, especially on the early bosses. The final boss of the raid was very briefly and mistakenly opened up on the test realm, which revealed a very interesting and new memory-based mechanic. And that mechanic is likely to be a very first look at the new approaches that the developers might be planning to take now that they don't have to worry so much about add-ons. My main concern from the testing though is for heroic raiders. I think that for groups and pug raiders who take well into the second half of a season to clear the raids in heroic normally, these changes will be pretty good, with a lot less pass-fail mechanics. But for organised groups who clear the raid before the first minor patch even comes out, I do worry that it could feel a little bit unchallenging. And whether that will manifest as a widening or narrowing of the gap between heroic and mythic raiding does still remain to be seen, as tuning will have a massive impact here. As for Mythic Plus testing, we got access to 4 of the dungeons: Pit of Sarin, Skyreach, Seat of the Triumvirate and Algathar Academy. Pit of Sarin is from Wrath of the Lich King and unsurprisingly has required some major changes in both boss and ad design to make it work for Mythic Plus, and it feels very mechanically different from the original. Visually though, it is largely unchanged, and I'm not entirely sure that the visuals have held up for the modern era. Those of you who do time walking will probably already know that some, but not all of the Wrath of the Lich King dungeons do look pretty dated, even when being compared to the even older Burning Crusade dungeons. Skyreach, on the other hand, stands up really well in the modern era, with interesting bosses and some nice tweaks to the wind mechanics to make them a bit less punishing. However, I am expecting that the first boss will very likely turn out to be a little bit of a pug killer, at least for the first couple of weeks. Seat of the Triumvirate was arguably one of the least popular Mythic Plus dungeons of Legion. And the possibly bad news is that I think it's also going to end up holding the same crown in Midnight Season 1, with an awkward layout and some very annoying mechanics. Albeit, at the same time, during testing, this dungeon was very obviously overtuned. Back during Dragonflight, Algathar Academy was a bit of a love it or hate it dungeon, and for me, after a rocky start, it ended up becoming a favourite of mine. And for Midnight Season 1, both Veximus and Croth are getting mechanical changes to make them less punishing, so if anything, it has been improved even further. Now overall, Mythic Plus testing did have a pretty rocky start, with some very punishing ad packs filled with spam casters, something that we had been promised would not be the case in the post add-on world. To their credit, the Blizzard developers took the initial feedback from the testers fully on board, with a series of hotfix changes being rolled out over the course of the week, some announced and some not. These included a thinning out of ad packs in Pit of Sarin and Seat of the Triumvirate, which focused heavily on removing casters, along with many other trash ads across the board having either their casts removed or significantly reduced. These changes had a huge impact on the dungeons, and by the end of the first week of testing, they had all undergone major improvements, meaning that the initial pessimism about the state of Mythic Plus in Midnight has, at least for me, given way to cautious optimism. There is of course still quite a way to go, with the other 4 dungeons still to be unveiled, along with the later raid bosses. Testing has also brought the updates for the Midnight user interface to the fore, with both the recently unveiled damage meter and nameplates becoming flashpoints for player feedback. Throughout both the alpha and beta, the biggest single complaint about the new nameplates from testers has been stacking and positioning. When taking on multiple ads, the nameplates would kinda be all over the place, sometimes falling through the floor or even getting stuck to the edge of the screen. And the problems that this would cause was very much to the fore during the Mythic Plus dungeon testing, making it very difficult for tanks to manage pool sizes, and DPS finding it often difficult to target the right ads, especially for interrupts. This issue is not just limited to the default user interface, as it also is affecting the nameplate add-ons, which are now starting to emerge, meaning that we're very heavily heavily reliant on Blizzard to fix the problem, and with the developers having been very strangely silent on this issue, especially compared to other areas of feedback, it has been causing a lot of concern for many of us. But thankfully, in the last couple of days, the developers did hotfix in some major improvements, including stopping them falling through the floor. Despite these changes, nameplates do still need some more attention, especially with how they overlap, but nevertheless, the hotfix has improved things quite a bit, and we're at last starting to get a little bit of confidence that this is being treated as a priority by the developers. Now, my own first impressions of the damage meter was to be very pleasantly surprised by how much functionality it had, but for a player base that's used to the might of details, they nevertheless did still feel like a bit of a regression. The biggest single issue currently is that the meter tends to reset if you zone out of dungeons and raids, and if that zoning out is due to an abandon vote, well, you don't get any time at all to review anything before they disappear. In response to some pretty negative feedback from testers, Blizzard released an update to reassure us that the damage meters are, even in their eyes, an unfinished product, and they went on to share a few of their plans, including updates to fix how they handle some damage sources, the ability to show damage in DPS side by side, enemy damage taken, and even a death recap. These will for sure be very welcome changes, and the impression I'm getting is that damage meters may end up being something of a work in progress for the remaining weeks of the beta. Moving away from the Mythic Plus and Raid testing, and the other main feedback flashpoint came from last week's unveiling of the new Transmog system, along with its eye-watering cost. And this is another area where the developers seem to have been taking the feedback from the community on the chin, announcing a series of major improvements. We'd already had confirmation at the end of last week that the warband slot unlocks would apply account-wide, but as a follow-up to concern about the overall cost of unlocking all of the slots, this is now going to be reduced by around 80%, which will take the cost down from 800,000 gold to just 160,000. And at the same time, the number of slots we can unlock is going to be increased from 20 up to 50. Now, I'm not clear if that reduced 160,000 price is going to be the total for unlocking all 50 slots, or just the original 20, but I'm hoping that it will turn out to be the former, as that would completely crush the setup costs for most players who won't need even 20 slots, let alone 50. But for those who do need to unlock all of them, I do think that 160,000 gold for 50 will make a lot more sense to people than that 800,000 gold for 20 did. But by far, the biggest complaint from the player base was the cost of applying a new transmog into a slot, which would be up to 6,500 gold at level 90. For players who maybe only have 2 or 3 sets that they use for an entire expansion, this cost would likely end up being a saving due to not having to pay to re-transmog as we upgrade our gear. But for players who like to change their appearance a lot, what was effectively a 500% increase in cost looks set to be a major burden, potentially even locking some of them out of their favourite playstyle. In response to this, Blizzard have now confirmed that the cost is going to be reduced by around 60% to around the 2,000 to 2,500 gold mark at max level. This will be around 1.5 times the current cost for a full Season 3 geared player, and will probably be a lot more manageable for most of the player base. Now, it is worth saying that the scaling of prices on the beta is currently a little bit strange, starting at around 1,500 gold at level 10 and going up in some weirdly large jumps at very odd points, so there could still be some devil in the detail when it comes to transmog pricing. And I do think that transmogrification fans are going to want to pay some close attention to the changes when they go live. Overall though, the willingness of the developers to act so quickly to feedback does give me a lot more confidence that the changes will likely put transmog in a much better place. The last couple of weeks on the beta test cycle have felt a little bit like a roller coaster, but that's kind of par for the course of a World of Warcraft expansions beta. But I have been very pleased by the willingness of the developers to not only listen to, but very quickly address most negative feedback on many player pain points, and it's given me a lot more confidence that Midnight is on track to land in a very good place. The main residual question in the mind of a lot of the community though is time. Allowing for the Christmas Christmas fortnight holiday break, there are just 5 weeks until the expected release of the pre-patch, and 10.5 weeks until the expansion proper. Content-wise, the beta is now in a pretty decent shape, with mainly just a few bugs and tuning issues needing to be dealt with, but the same cannot really be said for the user interface and add-on changes, which still very much look somewhat unfinished. And the developers are, I suspect, facing a pretty intensive few weeks as they work to try and pull it all together. Now, just before I wrap up, there are a couple of updates for the live game. This Monday is the start of December. Yes, really, this year has gone by that fast. And that means a brand new trading post. And thanks to Blizzard's Thanksgiving shutdown, we got an earlier than usual preview of it. The December trading post has a very wintry Tuskar theme, including a moose mount, the Kaluak Crest Horn, which is yours for 500 Traders Tender, and this rather lovely Noble Winter Collection Transmog set for 600, which comes with a matching pet bundled up Bob, which would set you back 250 Tender. Along with that, we're seeing the arrival of a past cash store set to the trading post, the Sky Witch's attire, which will set you back 750 Tender, and the Soaring Skyfox mount, which was also previously from the cash shop, is yours for another 750. So, oh boy, I hope you have been saving up those Tender. And the monthly reward for the December post is yet another mount. The Jeweled Sapphire Scarab is a thematic recolor of the Dragonflight's Gold Sync Scarab mounts. And finally, hidden away in the preview for the upcoming Turbulent Timeways event was a clarification about how we can obtain all of the 4 brand new mounts that are coming with the event. To very quickly recap, doing 4 time walking dungeons in at least 5 of the weeks of the event will award you with Taradin's mount voucher, offering you a choice of 1 out of the 4 mounts. Up until now, we didn't know for sure if or even how we'd be able to get the other mounts, but the new update has now confirmed that once you earn your mount, that will open up access to purchase the other mounts for Time Warp badges, most likely for 5,000 each. And we also got confirmation that the previous Turbulent Timeways mount, the awesome Chrono Corsair, will be making its debut on the time walking vendors as well. And that's it for this week's update. I'm really interested in hearing all of your thoughts about Midnight. Have the developer updates made you a bit more optimistic? Or were you already optimistic? Let me know in the comments down below. If you found this update helpful, entertaining, or even just plain annoying, then let me know by hitting that like icon. And if you want to support my channel to grow and help me to make more of these videos, along with my other content, then hit that subscribe button right now before you forget. If you don't want to miss out whenever I release a new video, then as well as subscribing, you can follow me in social media for updates. My links are in the description below as well. That's all for now. Thanks for watching.